The cold had a way of crawling into a man's bones on the Eastern Front, the kind of cold that made even the bravest soldiers feel small. It wrapped itself around rifles, boots, and hearts, freezing not just the body but the spirit. In the winter of 1943, as the war between Germany and the Soviet Union turned into a desperate, grinding slaughter, one German soldier found himself staring down the barrel of a decision that would follow him for the rest of his life. His name was Lucas Baur. He was not famous. He was not a hero in the way stories usually tell them. He had no medals, no special training, no legendary victories. He was simply a young man from a farming village near Augsburg, drafted into a war he never wanted to fight. Before the war, Lucas had lived a quiet life. He woke up before dawn to milk cows with his father, repaired fences, and dreamed of becoming a schoolteacher. He had been raised in a household where his mother believed deeply in kindness, where even injured animals were treated with care. When he was a boy, Lucas once spent weeks nursing a wounded bird back to health. His father had laughed and said, "You won't survive this world if you keep feeling so much," but his mother had smiled proudly. Now, years later, that same boy was wearing a German uniform, holding a rifle that could end a human life in a single squeeze of the trigger. He had already seen too much. He had seen villages burned, civilians fleeing in terror, and young soldiers screaming for their mothers as they bled out in the snow. Every day the front line swallowed men whole, leaving nothing behind but frozen corpses and shattered families. And yet, somehow, Lucas had never fired his weapon at another person. Not because he had not been ordered to, not because he had not been given opportunities, but because, in the deepest part of his soul, he could not bring himself to do it. At first, it had been easy to justify. His unit was often in support roles, guarding supply routes, or holding rear positions. When fighting erupted, he stayed low, firing into the air or at empty buildings, telling himself that he was still doing his duty. But as the war grew more desperate, his commanders demanded more. "Bauer, shoot!" a sergeant once screamed as Soviet soldiers advanced through a ruined village. Lucas raised his rifle, aimed toward the chaos, and pulled the trigger, but not at a man. He shot at a broken wall, just close enough to make it sound real. His hands shook. His heart pounded. He felt like a coward. And yet, he also felt something else: relief. One evening, after a brutal skirmish, Lucas found a wounded Soviet soldier lying in the snow behind a destroyed barn. The man was barely older than him, his uniform soaked in blood, his eyes wide with fear. He tried to reach for his pistol, but his hand trembled too much. Lucas could have killed him. It would have been easy. It would have been expected. But when he looked into the man's eyes, he did not see an enemy. He saw someone just like himself, a boy dragged into a war he never chose. Instead of pulling the trigger, Lucas knelt down and pressed a piece of cloth against the wound. The Soviet soldier stared at him in disbelief. "Why?" he whispered in broken German. Lucas didn't have an answer. He only knew that something inside him refused to let another life end by his hand. He bandaged the wound as best he could, then quietly walked away, leaving the man alive in the freezing night. For weeks afterward, Lucas lived in fear that someone had seen him, that he would be reported, that he would be executed for treason, but no one came. The war rolled on. His unit was soon sent closer to the front lines, where the fighting was more intense. There were no empty walls to shoot at, no safe places to hide. When attacks came, men died in seconds. One morning, Lucas's squad was ordered to clear a group of abandoned houses where Soviet scouts were believed to be hiding. As they moved through the ruins, bullets began to fly. One of his closest friends, a young man named Otto, was hit in the chest and collapsed in the doorway. "Help me," Otto gasped. Lucas dragged him inside, pressing his hands against the wound, but the blood would not stop. "You'll be okay," Lucas lied. Otto looked up at him, eyes full of fear. "Did you kill any of them?" Lucas hesitated. Otto seemed to understand the silence. You never shoot at them, do you? Lucas couldn't answer. Otto gave a weak smile. I wish I was like you. Then he was gone. That night, Lucas sat alone, staring at his rifle, wondering if his refusal to kill had made him responsible for Otto's death. The doubt nearly broke him. The next day, the fighting intensified. Soviet forces were pushing back, and German units were being forced into retreat. In the chaos, Lucas's squad became separated from the rest of the company. They took shelter in a ruined farmhouse as Soviet soldiers surrounded the area. Bauer, the lieutenant whispered, if they come in, you shoot. Lucas nodded, though his stomach twisted. The door burst open. A Soviet soldier stepped inside, weapon raised. Time slowed. Lucas aimed his rifle at the man's chest. This was it. No walls to shoot. No air to fire into. No excuse. Just a man in front of him. The Soviet soldier froze when he saw Lucas. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither moved. Then, slowly, the Soviet lowered his weapon. So did Lucas. They stared at each other in silence as the war raged outside. Then the Soviet soldier turned and left. The lieutenant never knew. Lucas never told anyone. But from that day on, something inside him changed. He realized that even in the middle of the worst violence humanity had ever unleashed, there were still moments of choice. And he had made his. As the war dragged on, Lucas continued to survive. He was wounded once, taken prisoner by Soviet forces in 1944. In the camp, he met men from every corner of Europe, each with stories of loss and horror. One night, a fellow prisoner asked him how many men he had killed. None, Lucas said. The man laughed bitterly. Then you were not really a soldier. Lucas did not argue. When the war ended, Lucas returned to Germany, to a country in ruins. His village had been bombed. His parents were gone. The world he had known no longer existed. But he was alive. Years later, Lucas became a teacher, just as he had dreamed. He told his students about history, about war, about how easily people could be swept into violence. He never told them what he had done or not done. But sometimes, when he looked at their young faces, he thought of all the boys who never came home. And he knew that, in a world gone mad, the smallest acts of mercy could be the bravest of all. Because in the middle of World War II, when killing was not just allowed but demanded, one soldier had refused. The war ended, but for Lucas Bauer it never truly stopped. When he returned to what remained of his village in southern Germany, the silence felt louder than the artillery ever had. Roofs were gone, walls were blackened by fire, and the fields where he had once worked beside his father were filled with weeds instead of wheat. People walked past one another like ghosts, carrying their grief quietly because everyone had lost someone. Lucas moved into the ruins of his family home. His parents were gone killed in a bombing raid 2 years earlier, according to a neighbor who barely recognized him. He dug through the rubble and found only fragments of his old life: a broken picture frame, a cracked plate, a school book with his name written inside. At night, he lay on a mattress made of straw, staring at the ceiling that wasn't really there anymore, and the faces of the men he had spared came back to him. He wondered if any of them were still alive. He wondered if any of them ever thought of him. Most of all, he wondered whether he had done the right thing. Germany in 1945 was not a place of celebration. It was a land of hunger, guilt, and ruins. Lucas found work helping clear debris from bombed buildings. Day after day, he lifted stones and broken beams, slowly rebuilding a country that felt broken beyond repair. One afternoon, as he worked alongside a group of other former soldiers, the conversation turned to the war. "How many did you get?" One man asked proudly, as if talking about hunting animals. "3," another replied, "maybe 4. I stopped counting." They turned to Lucas. "What about you, Bauer?" He hesitated. "None. The laughter that followed was sharp and cruel. "Then you were useless," one of them sneered. "Men died because of cowards like you." Lucas said nothing. He picked up another stone and carried it away, but their words stayed with him. Had men really died because he refused to kill? Had he failed his friends, his country, his family? He carried those questions with him like invisible scars. One day, months after the war, a Red Cross worker came to the village. She was collecting information about former prisoners of war, trying to reunite families separated by the chaos. When Lucas heard her speak Russian, his heart skipped. He approached her hesitantly. I once helped a wounded Russian soldier. In 1943, near a village outside Kursk." She looked at him carefully. "Do you remember his name?" "No." "His unit?" "No. All I know is he lived, because I didn't kill him." The woman smiled gently. "Then you did something very rare." A few weeks later, she returned. "I found someone," she said. Lucas felt dizzy. "You did?" "A former Soviet soldier named Ivan Petrov. He was wounded near Kursk. He told us about a German who saved his life." Lucas could hardly breathe. "He asked if the German was still alive," she continued. "When I told him yes, he cried. The Red Cross arranged for a letter to be delivered." Lucas held the envelope for a long time before opening it. Inside was a short message, written in shaky German. "I do not know your name, but I remember your face. You saved me when you did not have to. I survived the war. I have a wife and a son. My son lives because of you. I will never forget." Lucas sat down and wept. For the first time since the war, he felt something close to peace. Years passed. Germany slowly rebuilt itself. Lucas studied at a small teacher's college, working during the day and studying at night. He married a quiet woman named Anna who had lost her brother in the war. Together, they tried to build a future from the ashes of the past. Sometimes, though, Lucas would wake up sweating, hearing the echoes of gunfire in his dreams. Anna would hold him and whisper, "You're safe now." But he knew part of him was still on that frozen battlefield, standing in front of a man he refused to kill. In the 1960s, Lucas received another letter. This one was from Ivan. "I will be visiting Germany next month," it said. "If you wish, I would like to meet you." They met in a small cafe in Munich. At first, they did not recognize each other. Time had changed them both, but when Ivan smiled, Lucas knew. They sat in silence for a moment, two former enemies who had once faced each other with weapons in their hands. Ivan reached across the table and took Lucas's hand. "You gave me my life back," Lucas shook his head. "I just didn't take it," Ivan laughed softly. In war, that is the same thing. They spoke for hours, sharing stories of families, losses, and the strange ways their lives had turned. When they parted, they hugged like brothers. Lucas lived into old age. He taught generations of students about history, not as a list of dates and battles, but as a story of people and choices. Near the end of his life, one of his students asked him, "Do you think one person can make a difference?" Lucas thought of a wounded soldier in the snow. "Yes," he said. "Sometimes all it takes is one person to refuse to do what everyone else expects." And in a world that had demanded he kill, he had chosen to let someone live. That choice echoed long after the guns fell silent.